Your hands are not shaking. That is the part that frightens you the most. The surgical scissors hover 2 inches above his chest. The fluorescent light above the table hums at a frequency you have never noticed before tonight, thin and constant, like a sound designed to make you feel alone. The walls of this room are concrete. No windows. No hospital smell. Just disinfectant layered over something older, something the bleach never fully reached. 3 men stand at the perimeter of the room with rifles across their chests. They are not watching the patient. They are watching you. The man on the table weighs roughly 210 pounds. Gunshot wound to the lower left abdomen. Entry point clean, exit point messier. Damage to the descending colon is likely. He has lost significant blood. Your estimate is 1.4 liters from the soaked cloth they used to transport him. You have 8 minutes before the window for clean repair begins to close. You know this the way a pianist knows a key change. Without thinking. Without calculation. You know his face. The recognition arrives like cold water poured across your neck. The jaw. The scar that cuts diagonally through his left eyebrow. The tattoo of an eagle mid-flight across the right side of his neck, its wings spread toward his collarbone. You have seen that face in a photograph. You have seen it in your own mind every night for the past 11 months, replaying a single moment in an operating room that smelled nothing like this one. He is the commander responsible for the crossfire. The one that killed the boy. Your chest does not cave in. Your jaw does not tighten. You simply stand here with the scissors in your hand, in this underground room, surrounded by men with guns, while your mind runs the mathematics of a problem that medical school never taught you how to solve. Saving him means a killer continues his life. Letting him die means abandoning the oath that has defined every year of yours. You open his chest cavity. The anesthesia is pulling him under now. His eyes are losing focus, drifting toward the ceiling, finding nothing there. His lips move. The sound is barely audible, a sentence pushed out through the fog of sedation, one word at a time. He says the boy was not supposed to be there. He says he tried to stop it. 4 years ago, your biggest problem was parking. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, Los Angeles. You drove a 2019 Volvo the color of charcoal. You kept a granola bar in your left coat pocket and a retractable ballpoint pen in the right, and you arrived every morning at 6:47 a.m. because arriving at 6:45 felt obsessive and 6:50 felt careless. Small disciplines. You believed in small disciplines the way other people believe in prayer. You were a pediatric trauma surgeon with 14 years of experience and a reputation built on 2 things, patience and precision. The parents of your patients used words like gentle when they described you to their friends. Calm. You were the doctor they wanted in the room when their child was the one who needed saving, not because you were brilliant, though your colleagues would argue you were, but because you did not panic in places where panic was the natural response. Children, you had learned, could feel panic through the air. It changed their physiology. It elevated their cortisol. It made the work harder. So you had trained yourself to be still, and the stillness had become real, and over 14 years it had calcified into something that looked, from the outside, like peace. It was not peace. It was control. And the difference mattered. You had a daughter named Maya, 11 years old, who collected novelty erasers and was quietly furious that you missed her school play 2 Novembers in a row. You had an apartment in Silver Lake with a kitchen you barely used and a view of the reservoir that you paid for and never looked at. You had a gym membership and a standing Saturday lunch with a colleague named Dr. Priya Nair who always ordered the salmon and always talked you into ordering dessert. You believed medicine was a wall. Not a metaphorical one. You believed the hospital, with its protocols and its sterile floors and its locked medication cabinets, was a physical barrier between the world's violence and the people inside it. Children in particular. Children came to you broken and left whole, and you understood your role in that transaction with a clarity that bordered on faith. The hospital was a sanctuary. You believed that completely. Until the night the crossfire arrived in a black duffel bag of trauma, and you understood, standing under the bright white lights of your own operating room, that the wall was not a wall at all. It was just a building. His name is never written anywhere in the official record. You know it anyway. Miguel. 14 years old. A neighbor who was outside bought him in, not in an ambulance, just a car, a Toyota Camry with the back seat already destroyed. The man driving was shaking too hard to speak. He simply pointed at the back seat and your team moved without being told. Miguel weighs 112 pounds. A bullet from a high-velocity round entered through his right lateral thorax between the fourth and fifth ribs. The trajectory is downward, which means whoever fired it was elevated, a rooftop, a window, a car above street level. The bullet kissed the right lung and kept moving. You run the math as they wheel him into Trauma Bay 3. The clock on the wall reads 11:43 p.m. You have worked on children with worse entry wounds. You have also watched children with better entry wounds die anyway, because the body has its own mathematics, and sometimes the numbers do not cooperate. You open him up at 11:51 p.m. The operating room smells like copper and saline. Your resident, a 29-year-old named Chen, holds retractors with steady hands. You control your breath. You work in quadrants. You locate the hemorrhage, you address it, you move to the next problem, then the next. The room is quiet except for the machines. The monitors track everything. The numbers are not good but they are not catastrophic. You believe, at 12:34 a.m., that you are winning. At 1:09 a.m. the secondary hemorrhage begins. It is fast. Faster than the presentation suggested it would be. The numbers on the monitor shift in the wrong direction and you accelerate and Chen accelerates with you and the room is no longer quiet. Someone calls out a pressure reading and someone else reaches for another unit of blood and you are making decisions in the time it takes other people to blink. At 1:22 a.m. Miguel's heart stops. You run the resuscitation protocol for 11 minutes. His heart does not restart. The room stops the way rooms stop in those moments, not with noise but with a particular quality of silence that has weight to it. You stand with your hands at your sides. The clock reads 1:33 a.m. Chen does not look at you. Nobody does. The monitors have been silenced but the image of the flat line lingers on the screen like a sentence that has already been read. You walk to the scrub sink. You wash your hands for longer than necessary. You do not cry. You never cry in the hospital. That is another small discipline. But standing at the sink, you notice your reflection in the metal surface above the faucet, distorted, unrecognizable, and you think, this is what it looks like when a wall fails. 2 days later, a man asks for you by name. He arrives at your office without an appointment. Your assistant calls ahead on the intercom, there is a man, she says, and her voice carries something unfamiliar in it, something careful. He says it is personal. He says he will wait. You expect grief. Grief arrives in your office regularly. It arrives in the form of exhausted parents with dark circles and paper cups of coffee and questions they need answered more than they need to be answered correctly. You know how to receive it. You have a particular posture for it, slightly forward, hands visible on the desk, voice low. The man who sits across from you is not grieving. Not visibly. He is perhaps 55. His suit is dark navy, well cut, the kind of quality that is designed not to announce itself. His hands are folded on his knee. His posture is the posture of a man who has spent decades in rooms where composure was a survival skill. He tells you his name. He tells you Miguel was his son. And then, without pausing, he tells you he holds a senior position within a cartel network operating across 3 states and parts of northern Mexico. He says it the way a man says his occupation at a dinner party. The room does not change. The light does not shift. You simply sit with the information and breathe. He tells you he does not blame you for Miguel's death. He blames the chaos, the structural breakdown inside the network that allowed an unsanctioned confrontation in a civilian area. He blames the fact that injured cartel soldiers, when left without medical care, make decisions that destabilize operations and cost civilian lives. He needs a doctor. Not a hospital. Not a clinic with records and reporting requirements. A doctor. One who understands trauma, who can be reached at any hour, who will treat a wound without asking questions that create problems for everyone. He slides a card across the desk. No name on it. A number. He tells you the compensation for a single procedure is $12,000 in cash. He tells you the work is medicine. Nothing more. He tells you no cartel associate will ever set foot in your hospital, near your colleagues, or anywhere near your daughter. He pauses before leaving. He says, the man responsible for the crossfire that killed Miguel is still alive. Still operating. Still making decisions that kill people. Then he walks out and closes the door behind him. You look at the card for a long time. You tell yourself it is medicine. That is the sentence you use. You repeat it while you pack a second surgical kit. You repeat it while you memorize the number on the card. You repeat it on the drive 3 weeks later, following GPS coordinates to a warehouse in a part of the city where the streets are named after saints and the buildings have no visible addresses. You park where you are told to park. A man you have never seen opens the passenger door without knocking. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The procedure takes 2 hours and 17 minutes. Gunshot wound, right thigh, femoral artery involvement, complicated by a delay in presentation of nearly 6 hours, which tells you everything about how these men operate and nothing about who they are. You work in a room that is surprisingly well equipped, a surgical table with proper adjustment capability, for stands, an anesthesia unit that is older but functional, decent lighting. Someone has thought carefully about this room. Someone with medical knowledge, or access to someone with medical knowledge. You wonder briefly who came before you. The patient is a man in his late 30s with tattoos covering both forearms and a resting expression that communicates absolute indifference to his own condition. He watches the ceiling during local anesthetic administration. He does not ask questions. When the sedation pulls him under, his face relaxes into something that looks almost like ordinary sleep. The repair is clean. No complications. You close with precision and give post-operative instructions to the man standing nearest the door. They hand you an envelope. $12,000, counted in hundreds, clipped in 3 separate bundles. You put it in the outer pocket of your surgical bag. On the way to your car, one of the men falls into step beside you. He is young, perhaps 24, perhaps younger, with a light scar cutting across the bridge of his nose and the flat eyes of someone who learned very early that eye contact is a form of negotiation. He walks you to your car. He waits while you unlock it. He says, "We know where you live, doctor. We know where your daughter goes to school. We know your schedule at the hospital. Then he smiles. He says, "It is good to have you with us." He says it like a welcome. You drive home with $12,000 in your bag and a new understanding of what the word trapped means when it is not a metaphor. By the 6th week, you understand the architecture. The cartel does not operate the way crime looks in films. There is no single dark room where men in suits make dramatic decisions. There is a supply chain. There is a communication infrastructure. There are protocols for exactly the kind of situation you have become, a professional asset embedded inside normal life, activated on a need basis, compensated in cash, and managed through intermediaries who themselves do not know the full picture. You are assigned a contact. You will know him only as Victor. He is mid-40s, barrel-chested, drives a different vehicle every time he picks up the phone. Victor handles logistics. He tells you when, where, and how. He never tells you who or why. You learn quickly not to ask. The safe houses rotate on a 7-day cycle. The surgical room you used that first night no longer exists at that address. The equipment has been moved, the space converted back to storage. You are driven to 3 different locations over 6 weeks. Each one different. Each one stocked with the same core equipment. Each one clean to a standard that tells you someone with actual infection control knowledge is overseeing the setup. You treat 9 patients over 43 days. Gunshot wounds, 5. Stab wounds, 2. 1 severe burns case from a fire during a distribution dispute. 1 man who simply arrives unconscious and whose chart you are not shown. You treat what you can see. You do not inquire beyond what the wound tells you. You are paid $12,000 per procedure, always cash, always within 24 hours. You open a second bank account in a name that is technically yours through a business registration. You tell yourself this is practical. You tell yourself you are protecting Maya from the visibility of the cash. You tell yourself the account is temporary. You become aware of something else. Your hospital work is changing. Not your skill, your attention. You sit in morning briefings at Cedars and find yourself reading the room differently. Exits. Sight lines. Who is standing nearest the door? You catch yourself assessing the security guard's alertness and realize you have been doing it unconsciously for at least 2 weeks. The cartel has not asked you to change. You are changing on your own. One evening Victor calls with a different tone in his voice. He says a high-ranking commander needs surgery tonight. He says this one is important. He says it twice. The drive takes 40 minutes. You count the turns out of habit, 17 right turns, 4 lefts, 2 stretches of unpaved road, not because you plan to retrace the route, but because your mind needs something to count when the rest of it is quiet. The vehicle is an SUV with tinted windows and a radio that no one turns on. Victor is in the passenger seat. The driver has not spoken since you got in. The location is a compound 40 minutes east of the city. You smell it before you see it, the faint chemical sharpness of antiseptic laid over concrete dust, which you now associate entirely with this kind of room. 2 guards at the door scan you with a wand and step aside. A man you recognize as cartel leadership, you have seen him once before, across a parking structure during a handoff 3 weeks ago, stands at the center of the room with his arms crossed. He tells you to prepare. They will the patient in. The recognition is immediate. Every face you have examined in 11 months of replaying that night, every reconstruction of the chain of events that ended with Miguel's heart stopping at 1:22 a.m., it arrives in a single second of convergence, and the room contracts around you like a fist. The eagle tattoo across the right side of his neck. Wings spread toward the collarbone. He is unconscious. The wound is a gunshot to the lower left abdomen. Entry and exit. Significant blood loss. You estimate 1.3 liters. His blood pressure is low but not collapsed. He has perhaps a 20-minute window before the physiological calculus shifts permanently against him. The cartel leader's eyes are on your hands. He says, "Save him." He says it once. Your hands do not shake. You reach for gloves. You reach for forceps. You begin the assessment with the same systematic movement you have used 10,000 times in 14 years. Left hand here, right hand here. Quadrant by quadrant. Your mind goes to the procedure the way it always goes, fully, completely, the rest of the world moving to the edges. But the edges hold something tonight. The knowledge of who this man is sits there, just outside the focus of the surgery, like a sound you cannot unhear. You make the first incision. The room is silent except for the monitors. Then, as the sedation deepens, the commander's lips move. He is not awake. The words come from somewhere below consciousness, shaped by whatever the anesthesia releases when it dismantles the wall between thought and language. He says, "I told them to move back." He says, "The boy was not supposed to be in that street." You operate. Your hands do not slow. The left anterior descending work requires your full attention and you give it, because the work has never allowed you to give anything less. But the sentence from the commander's unconscious mind sits in the room like a third presence, and piece by piece, across the 47 minutes of the repair, the architecture of what actually happened that night begins to restructure itself. You know the geography of that crossfire. You studied it in the weeks after Miguel died, not for legal reasons, not to assign blame in any formal sense, but because you are someone who needs to understand the mechanism of a wound before you can stop carrying it. The crossfire happened at an intersection. Two factions. The reports placed the commander's vehicles on the north side. But the trajectory of the bullet that killed Miguel was downward and lateral, coming from the east. You have known this for 11 months. You have never examined what it meant. The commander was on the north side. The east position belonged to a rival faction, the one his convoy was attempting to intercept. The crossfire was not initiated by him. The bullet that killed a 14-year-old boy came from a gun held by someone the commander was there to stop. Your jaw tightens beneath the surgical mask. Not at him. At the 11 months you spent building a clean story out of complicated geography because clean stories are easier to carry than complicated ones. He is not innocent. You are not confused about that. A man who operates within a system that puts firearms into a civilian intersection at 11:30 at night is not innocent because he was trying to limit the damage. The damage exists because the system exists. His hands are in the system. But he did not pull the trigger. At minute 43, the repair is complete. At minute 47, you close. At minute 48, the commander's heart rate drops to a number that requires your immediate and complete attention. The monitor alarm does not sound like an alarm. It sounds like a question. 17 months of decisions collapse into a single point. You pick up the defibrillator paddles. His heart restarts on the second shock. 302 joules. The body arches, settles, and the monitor climbs back toward a number that means alive. You watch the rhythm stabilize for 40 seconds before you allow yourself a breath. Your resident, they assigned you a resident tonight, a young man named Delgado who has not asked a single question since entering this room, looks at the monitor and then looks at you. You nod once. He begins post-operative documentation. The surgery takes 3 hours and 11 minutes in total. You close the final layer at 2:34 a.m. You strip the gloves. You pour saline over your wrists at the portable scrub station in the corner of the room. The water is cold. You leave it running longer than necessary. The cartel leader enters when you step away from the table. He has been in the adjacent room. You were not told this, but you suspected it, the particular quality of silence on the other side of the wall that is not the silence of an empty space. He looks at the commander on the table, at the closed incision, at the stable readings on the monitor. He says nothing for a moment. Then he tells you this was a test. He says it without apology. He tells you they had to know whether a physician who understood who this man was could still perform the surgery. They needed to confirm that your professionalism was not conditional, that it could not be overridden by emotion or personal history. He tells you that you passed. He tells you the cartel wants to offer you a permanent position. A retainer of $40,000 per month. A dedicated vehicle. A secure phone. Access to equipment at a level no underground surgical room has previously maintained. He tells you that your daughter's school fees are already paid for the next academic year, as a gesture of good faith. He says it like a kindness. You look at the man on the table. Then you look at your hands. The mirror above the scrub sink is the size of a dinner plate. You stand in front of it for a long time. The man who looks back at you is 41 years old. He has a surgical mask hanging around his neck and a faint bloodstain on the left sleeve of his scrub top that the scrub brush did not fully reach. His eyes are clear. That is the part that surprises you. You expected something different in the eyes after a night like this. A shift. Evidence of a line crossed. But the eyes are the same eyes. The oath you took does not contain a clause for situations like this. It does not say, save lives unless the life belongs to someone who has cost other lives. It does not say, withhold skill when withholding feels like justice. It says, heal. It says that without conditions. It says it in a language that predates courtrooms and cartels and complicated men with eagle tattoos on their necks. You saved him. You may have saved him so he can cause harm again. You will never know whether what you did tonight was right. That is the weight. Not the guilt. Not the certainty of wrongness. The permanent, unresolvable not knowing, the fact that the moral line you thought was clearly drawn was, in the end, a line drawn in water. You look at yourself in the mirror. The person looking back is still a doctor. Whether that is enough is a question the mirror cannot answer.